famous last words, according to Shakespeare, were a horse like even for the horse, for a horse. And Shakespeare, of course, was writing for the Tudor family. The Tudor family are the ones that killed this guy. And if you're a playwright in England at the time, you want to do everything you can to make sure that the Tudor family is really happy. And so you do a lot of lying. And those were not his last words. His last words were treason, 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 and they cut him down. That's why I call the whole thing treason, treason, treason. Well, okay, causes of death. We have a whole series of causes of death, mostly on the head or the rear end. When we treat Alan, he was cut in the head with a sword going into his skull. Probably got it in the neck, and then it went all the way into the brain. That won't flew in today. And of course, then the other cut, which may have been when they beheaded him, or it may have been when they killed him, was that everything else is negligible in terms of cause of death, but would have caused a tremendous amount of pain if he was still alive. And your sword cut across your face doesn't feel very good, I'm sure. Well, what kind of protection did he probably have? Well, probably is what they call a sallet on something like this. It's got solid protection on top, and the back, and then it's got what they call a beaver in front here. You can lift up to see or drop down. It still has this slit that you can see. Notice it's got a lip on the bottom so that you can't jab it in from the bottom. You've got to get it from the top if you're going to go that way. This may have been the weapon that killed him, although I think swords are probably more likely. But this is a possibility when he jabbed into his neck and then into the base of his skull. What did armor look like in the 1480s? These are, I have a reenactor on the left-hand side and a picture from eBay on the right. $500 you can be a knight these days, or at least to reenact. So how did Richard get to this point? What's the historical context of all of this? Well, it starts with his great-grandfather, Edward III, and his wife, Philippa of Hainault. Edward III and his wife were actually desperately in love with each other, even though it was an arranged marriage. And the product of that was 13 children, 5 of whom died of the plague, 1 or 2 others took orders, but the rest of them produced children. And they produced scads of children. And those children vied for the throne of England. And they vied for the throne of England for for about 100 years, 85 years to be exact, in a group of wars called the Wars of the Roses. This is the classic battle between the House of York, the White Rose, and the House of Lancaster, the Red Rose. In one of the battles fought on Palm Sunday, and it was 1452, the Battle of Towton. An estimated between 1% and 2% of the whole population of England died. It was fought in a blizzard, which didn't help matters. And there were huge forces, huge armies fighting that day. And it just must have been an awful mess. About 10 years ago, they found 23 of the bodies that had been dumped in the grave. People wanted to put a garage in their house, and they started digging up these people, and decided they better stop. They called in the police and then the archaeologists and so forth and so on. You know, this is a dramatization of the House of York and the House of Lancaster. Well, the immediate historical context is Richard's brother, Edward IV, and his wife, his very unpopular wife, Elizabeth Wisdom. Edward IV was a tall, handsome, daring ruler. He was a ladies' man. He was the apex of hygiene at the time because he had his face washed once a week. The rest of his body, I have no idea. But anyway, he had a number of mistresses, etc., and illegitimate children, and women just flocked to him. big tall guy, a little over 6 feet tall probably, and which would put him about head and shoulders above almost anybody else at the time. Well, he died mysteriously and suddenly. He had a couple of strokes probably, died, and he left a number of children. 2 children were important, and of course his brother, Richard Plantagenet. Richard was the Duke of Gloucester. He was the brother of Edward IV. He was the uncle of Edward V, who was named as king, and Richard, his brother. The boys were put for their protection in the Tower of London after he finally coaxed the mother Elizabeth to allow the boys to be taken from Westminster Abbey to the Tower of London. And as soon as they were there, Richard declared himself king. He was Richard III. These are the boys. The only known portrait of Edward is on the left, and the 2 boys on the right are a Victorian romanization of the 2 lads. Well, this is the Tower of London. By the way, the Tower of London at that time was a royal castle more than anything, although it had a checkered history. And I think recently, or not so recently, I dug up about 1,500 bodies in that area that had somehow disappeared. Well, the boys disappeared. All of a sudden, they weren't there anymore, and no one knew who they were, where they were, they said. They were just gone. So there were the 2 boys in the tower, so-called. But in 1674, while repairing a staircase, the bones of 2 boys were dug up and reburied. They were buried in the stairs. The 2 boys were about the correct ages, and we just surmised that they were the 2 sons, Edward and Richard, of 2 sons of Edward IV. Were they murdered? Did they just die? Well, they were. The basic idea was that since they had disappeared, they were murdered by Richard. And Richard was a person of his time. People didn't fool around. Just to show that he was the king, in his first meeting, he accused one of his supporters of treason and had him summarily taken out and beheaded within 10 minutes, just to show that he was tough. Kings did that. When William the Conqueror was a lad of 17, he inherited the Duke of Normandy. He had a number of revolts against him. He besieged one of the towns and gave everybody the option of either surrendering, or when he was able to break the siege and enter the town, he would kill everybody. They didn't surrender, so when he did get into the town, he did kill everybody. The whole town was killed. So that's how you establish power and show that you were a tough guy in those days. People say that this is an era of doubt, and we really have to worry about our safety and so forth. We're in a really good bubble right now, folks. Okay, well, England was angry about the mysterious disappearance of these 2 boys, and so this individual, Henry Stafford, Duke of Buckingham, revolted against Richard. He lost the battle and was, of course, beheaded. But there was another person who wanted to take the throne. That was Henry Tudor, who was the Duke of Richmond. He was Welsh. He was distant cousin of Richard, and he had a claim to the throne as well. Now, Richard's last name was Plantagenet, which meant that he was in the male line. Tudor was not in the male line, but he was pretty close. And he had a couple of different lines that he could claim the throne from. Well, this is the last rivalry, and the last medieval rivalry of England. Richard Plantagenet on the left with his white boar flag, and Henry Tudor on the right with his Welsh dragon from stained glass. Henry landed, marched toward the center of England. So did Richard. Richard spent the night in Leicester. Here he marches out of Leicester. And the next day, in that day, the 22nd of August, 1485, the Battle of Bosworth was fought.